It's interesting how advanced it is that when people find an error, like it's like, oh, I found something that's wrong, which, you would expect there'd be lots of errors, right? When we started going down this path. And then we actually wrote the email and like nobody would know this is AI.
Welcome to What If, So What? The podcast where we ask what's possible with digital and figure out how to make it real in your business. I'm Jim Hertzfeld.
And I'm Kim Chopek.
And today we'll ask what if, so what, and most importantly, now what? This week, Microsoft released a new version of its Bing search engine powered by ChatGPT. Have you heard of it? Building on its multi-year, multi-billion-dollar partnership with OpenAI, you can sign up on Bing.com for the preview waitlist. You will have to use Microsoft's Edge browser, which is kind of an interesting wrinkle to the story. But to me, this kind of signals a new era in tech relevancy, and we've made AI real, I think, for millions of people, and it's really opened things up in the public consciousness. In fact, ChatGPT hit 1 million users in record time. And for comparison's sake, Netflix took about 3 years to hit 1 million users, Spotify 7 months, Instagram 2.5 months, ChatGPT 5 days to hit 1 million users. And there are tons of stories coming about in the last couple of months around ChatGPT, passing bar exams, creating recipes, writing fiction, even writing code. And that brings us to today's what if. What if AI-driven content could replace or augment knowledge workers with more data, more knowledge, better thinking, better institutional thinking? Is this the end of the line for half the knowledge workers? Kim, what do you think?
This is tough. We talked about AI before. I think the big so what here is just another reality check. All of the potential pitfalls that we've talked about before, the accuracy, the ethical questionability, privacy, IP ownership, can it scale? And my personal conflict is the humanness of the experience. Although I have to say, in the past few weeks, playing around with some of these AI tools is the first time I felt a little scared for my own job. It's getting more and more human. And, to your point, what does that mean to our knowledge workers and how we really leverage AI for good and not for evil? And we have someone here today who's going to help us figure this out. So to talk about the now what, we have Brian Flanagan. He's an AI strategist with Perficient. He's spent a lot of time thinking and implementing different AI. Brian, what do you think? What have we got on our hands here? Are robots taking over or not?
Yeah, not yet. But it is an amazing catalyst. So ChatGPT, as it got unleashed on the world, is really getting people to rethink the way that they work and create. It's an amazing product that allows people to generate new ideas, act upon those new ideas very quickly, and it's really accelerating traditional productivity. But it represents, one form. So we classify ChatGPT as a large language model. It has the ability to understand text input and present information in a way that's really understandable for humans. And that's really the real power of that platform. But generative AI is a type of artificial intelligence that can create new and unique outputs based on a variety of inputs. And this might be many different forms of content, such as text, images, audio, video, as Jim mentioned, code, and synthetic data. So it's generating data as well. And this is much different than how artificial intelligence has been historically leveraged. It used to be regulated to doing the heavy lifting behind the scenes, and the output that you receive was typically some form of analysis, like image recognition. So we're using artificial intelligence to comb through a large repository of images, classify them, tag them. That's the type of usage that we've seen in the past. But with generative AI, you can provide an input and the system goes and does some work for you. And that's really the difference, is that it's just not spitting back a result. It's going and doing work for you on the back end and then providing that information in a concise response. So that might be creating an image or writing a press release or even creating a workout plan for you. There's lots of potential with the large language models to handle all kinds of tasks.
But what about the humanness? What do you think?
We've definitely been looking at how do we make the interactions more human with artificial intelligence. And some of that is really classifying the way that these systems interact with users. So we need to bake in empathy in a clinical environment or in a healthcare environment, sometimes you have people that are reporting issues that may be very personal. So we want to show empathy. Like if they mention that, I think I broke my arm, we're going to say, oh, sorry to hear that. And now let's make sure that you're okay, that it's not an emergency, or we can redirect you to the next stage of the process. So showing that empathy is really important up front. That's one way to respond. And then, preparing people for information. So it's not about just outputting a bunch of information to a user. It is setting it up. Hey, here's what I found, or I put this together for you, which will actually help people transition from the query to processing the result that they got. And, the other piece there is really increasing the transparency of how this information was pulled together. We really push the concept of explainable AI so that you can understand where that answer came from. And so within the new Bing, Microsoft is featuring that they're actually putting in citations. So that it's coming from an actual source, I think, which really validates the data, makes you understand that, hey, it's not just all made up. Sometimes AI can fill in the gaps based on its understanding, and it may not always be accurate. We call those hallucinations. So it is, just creating content that it thinks is appropriate, but it doesn't really have the information. So being able to have the citations and explain where that result came from is very valuable.
One of the funny stories I heard reading about the Bing launch is that people were verifying the accuracy of the Bing results with a Google search, which I thought I thought was interesting. So yeah, I got this return and it checked out for Google, but that's interesting to hear. And I was also thinking, Brian, about some of these checkers that came out to verify, if you were looking to scan text or I suppose any content and evaluate whether it was AI generated or not. And you can kind of pick up on the tone in some of the work I've seen.
Yeah, there's certainly some patterns that you'll see. Some of the challenges is that it will repeat ideas, use the same words over and over. And the longer the text you have, the more common that is. Interestingly, OpenAI released their own analyzer to determine if content is AI developed, which is funny because you have ChatGPT developing the content, and then you have ChatGPT evaluating whether the content was developed by AI. So they go back and forth.
But Brian, why would anyone use AI, either personally or professionally? What are some of the benefits that you're seeing with some of the advances in the space?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of opportunity for leveraging AI into everything that you do, right? Whether that's a creative profession, creating images, or just getting ideas. So from a design perspective, we use it as inspiration and say, hey, where can I go with this concept? Give me some ideas. Rapid ideation is really important. As a content creator, these tools can generate content, and it's not always perfect, as I mentioned, but it really accelerates that process. And we generally recommend having a human in the loop to review the responses, to make revisions. Having somebody that really understands the topic can be helpful to enhance what you're providing as a response. So that's really important. But, these tools will really help accelerate that process. And, as a customer, somebody that's being targeted with a content, there's a lot of value there because now you can develop personalized content that's more relevant for me. It's not a one size fits all product description. E-commerce, retailers are developing personalized product descriptions that are tailored to individual customers and highlight what is meaningful to them. So if it's in a car shopping experience and maybe it's a Gen Z, you're going to use a certain perspective that focuses on, their more energetic lifestyle and some of the things that they want to do, going about the town and how they're going to use the vehicle versus if it's a grandmother that you're targeting and maybe it's around safety and the ease of use of the vehicle, right? Those are things that you can emphasize. So those customers benefit by having more of that relevant. It's as if you're talking to a friend or some advisor that is giving you that direct advice of how it meets your needs, which is really valuable. And for businesses, the benefit is that the cost of developing content is decreasing, right? So you can generate more content much more rapidly, which means that they can accomplish more with their marketing dollars. What used to take hours perhaps to write can now take minutes. You have the power of the platform plus the ability to train artificial intelligence to understand how you want to develop content. What are some of the parameters that you want to enforce? What's the tone and voice that you want to make sure are part of that content creation? And all of that is really increasing efficiency. Now, people are just going to do more, right? I'm trying to get to the point where we have a 4-day work week, right? Where AI can do more of the tasks, and hey, we got a 4-day work week. But the reality right now is people are just doing more with the technology. Mm-hmm. And then if you think about this, from society as a whole, the impact is potentially enormous. There's a lot of unknowns here, but one of the great use cases is that, tools like ChatGPT are democratizing access to knowledge and information across the globe. People that may not have access to some of the more advanced training and knowledge can now acquire that through something like ChatGPT. And it enables education to be a truly personal process, right? How do I want to learn? I can ask questions. If I don't understand a response, the ability to follow up with a question is really, so it's not, again, to that one size fits all approach. It can be very personal to me. If I haven't had the training on a particular topic, I can go and get that training or the information there and, follow up my questions.
I think that's one of the more interesting features of ChatGPT is the persistence of the line of questioning, right? It remembers what you asked, right? It's constantly contextualizing. I think that's a really powerful aspect in terms of education.
Yeah. And it's interesting how advanced it is that when people find an error, it's like, oh, I found something that's wrong, which, you would expect there'd be lots of errors, right? When we started going down this path, we thought, hey, let's write an email from AI and it'll be funny because it'll be all wrong, right? And then we actually wrote the email and nobody would know this is AI. Our experiment is, hey, it's not proving funny. It's like, you wouldn't even know it. And so I asked ChatGPT the other day I was looking for 4-letter words that end with AIL. And it gave me a list, but one of them that wasn't in there was mail. So I said, well, what about mail? And it goes, oh, I'm sorry. You're right. Mail's a 4-letter word that ends with AI.
Well, Brian, how do organizations then on the business side get started? Are these net new capabilities? Are we building on existing capabilities? What are some of the enablers that are needed to really leverage what we're seeing as a catalyst now in the AI space?
I think organizations have to take an AI first approach, right? So really looking at their challenges, they need to consider how artificial intelligence can help. It's not about just, choosing a technology and then finding a fit for it. It is looking at, what are their use cases? What are the things that they're trying to achieve as a business? And then let's see what might be the right AI solution for helping them achieve that. So that might be things like content creation or video editing. We talked about training, even application development. But it starts with what is the need? And then let's look at potential solutions and see where we can leverage this great new power. The other thing that we've seen is that in our strategy work, that the landscape is changing extremely rapidly, which means that these long-term roadmaps are very obsolete, right? Anything that's 3 years out, you have really no idea what the technology is going to be at that point. So at Perficient, we like to talk about agile strategy, and that approach has never been more relevant. So we're really looking at what are the near-term targets. We've got plans for how we want to evolve our solutions, which may have some technical components of that, but we're accounting for technical change. And as we develop dependencies and building some of the core functionality, we know that that's going to impact the rest of the efforts down the line. So it's really important to stay up to date, to learn what these new capabilities are and be able to apply them in an agile fashion.
That's great advice, Brian. And yeah, I will certainly endorse your agile strategy approach.
Thanks, Brian. I am truly feeling a lot more optimistic about the robots and the future of AI. Some really, really good examples on how you can benefit from using the technology, both personally and professionally. But Jim, we like to close our episodes with a true, what can you do today?
Right.
To leverage what we've been talking about. What do you think?
What do we do with all this direction that Brian gave us? Thanks again, Brian. And I really appreciate all the work you've been doing in exploring this space for a few years now. But if you haven't done it already, sign up for ChatGPT or Bing or the platform of your choosing, depending on the day that the next one comes out. And I think one of the things to do is sort of reflect on your daily life. What can you ask it to do professionally? And maybe every day you take one small task and you ask it to reply to an email for you or plan a meeting agenda. I know I was with the team the other day, we looked up common reason codes to dial into a contact center because we were trying to guide a client. We came up with 100 different ideas, and it was directionally interesting. So I think every day, you try it, you learn a little more about it firsthand. And I know I've got 3 questions that I'm going to ask when we're done here, and that is what if, so what, and now what?
You've been listening to What If, So What, the digital strategy podcast from Perficient with Jim Hertzfeld and Kim Chopek. We want to thank our Perficient colleagues, JD Norman and Rick Bauer, for our music today. Subscribe to the podcast and don't miss a single episode. You can find this season along with show notes at perficient.com. Thanks for listening.